Look, I have been teaching advanced quantum mechanics at the Galactic Institute for 300 cycles now, and I thought I had seen everything. Every species, every learning style, every possible way a student could misunderstand the fundamental laws of reality. But then they assigned me a human. His name was Marcus Webb. That should have been my first warning. The orientation packet described humans as adaptable problem solvers with unconventional thinking patterns. What it really meant was, these creatures will ignore every single protocol you have ever established and somehow still get the right answer. But I am getting ahead of myself. It was the first day of the advanced semester. My classroom held 12 students from across the Federation. There was Krill, a methodical Vexian who color-coded his notes in 17 different shades. Beside him sat Lorna, a Quellan whose species had been studying mathematics for longer than most civilizations had existed. In the back, a group of Threndic students huddled together, their shared consciousness making them excellent at collaborative calculations. And then there was Marcus Webb, sitting alone in the middle row, wearing what I would later learn humans call a hoodie, and looking like he had just rolled out of his sleeping pod. "Good morning, class," I began, activating the holographic display. "Today we will begin with the fundamental theorem of gravitational harmonics. Please open your textbooks to chapter 47. The sound of pages turning, data pads activating." Except for Marcus, who just stared at the ceiling tiles like they contained the secrets of the universe. "Mr. Webb," I said, probably with more sharpness than necessary. "Your textbook?" He blinked slowly. "Oh, yeah. About that. I read through it last night. Got a question though. 300 cycles of teaching, and I had never had a student claim to read 700 pages in one night. You read the entire textbook?" "Well, not the parts that were wrong." The classroom went silent. You could have heard a molecule split. Krill's color-coding stylus dropped onto his desk. Lorna's 3 eyes widened simultaneously. The Threndix collective made a sound like startled wind chimes. "I beg your pardon," I managed to say, my throat sacs inflating with what humans might recognize as indignation. Marcus leaned back in his chair, balancing on 2 legs in a way that violated at least 3 safety regulations. The section on gravitational constant interactions in non-standard dimensional spaces. It assumes that all dimensional boundaries maintain uniform permeability. But that can't be right, because if it were, then the Kelverix incident would not have happened the way it did. Now, here is the thing about the Kelverix incident. It was classified. Top-level Federation secret. A spatial anomaly that had consumed an entire research station 15 cycles ago, and the official explanation had been equipment malfunction. "How do you know about Kelverix?" I asked, my voice dropping to what I hoped was an intimidating register. "Wikipedia," Marcus said, as if that explained everything. "Well, the human version. We keep pretty good records of stuff. Anyway, the math in chapter 47 doesn't account for variable permeability, which means either the textbook is incomplete or someone is lying about what really happened at Kelverix. I should mention that I wrote that textbook. It had been peer-reviewed by the finest minds in the Federation. It had won awards. And this human, this barely adult member of a species that had only achieved faster than light travel 50 cycles ago, was sitting in my classroom suggesting it was wrong. "The textbook," I said carefully, "follows the approved Federation curriculum standards." "Right, but does it follow physics?" Krill raised one of his smaller appendages. "Professor Thex, should I report this incident to the Academic Conduct Board?" "That will not be necessary, Krill." I turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Webb, the Federation has been studying quantum mechanics for over 10,000 cycles. Perhaps humans simply lack the contextual understanding to fully grasp these concepts." Marcus grinned. Actually grinned. Cool. "So anyway, I worked out the corrected equations last night. Want to see?" Before I could respond, he pulled out a data pad, one of those cheap human-made ones that barely integrated with our systems, and tossed his calculations onto the main display. I am not ashamed to admit that my primary heart skipped a beat. The equations were messy, written in that chaotic human mathematical notation that looked like someone had let a child loose with a symbol generator. But underneath the chaos, the logic was sound. More than sound. It was elegant. He had not just identified the error in my textbook. He had solved a problem that had baffled Federation scientists for decades. Where did you learn this notation? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, I made it up. The standard galactic math symbols are kind of confusing, so I just use what makes sense to me. It is mostly based on old Earth calculus with some modifications for the extra-dimensional stuff. Lorna leaned forward, her translator clicking rapidly. But the standard notation exists to prevent exactly this kind of confusion. Every species uses the same symbols so we can communicate. Yeah, but what is the point of communication if the symbols do not actually represent what is happening? Marcus replied. Like, look at this variable right here. He highlighted a section of the standard equation. It is supposed to represent dimensional flux, but the symbol is the same one used for temporal variance 3 chapters earlier. How is anyone supposed to keep that straight? Context, Krill said firmly. The context makes it clear which meaning is intended. Or, Marcus countered, we could just use different symbols and not have to rely on context. I could feel a headache forming in my secondary brain. Mr. Webb, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, mathematics is not a creative exercise. We use standardized notation because it has been tested and proven over millennia. Right, but proven to do what? Communicate clearly or just maintain tradition? The Threndix collective chimed in, their voices overlapping. Tradition is how knowledge is preserved across generations. Without it, every species would have to reinvent mathematics from scratch. Sure, Marcus said, but humans did reinvent mathematics from scratch. Multiple times, actually. We have had like 5 different civilizations independently develop calculus. Sometimes the new version was better than the old one. That sounds incredibly inefficient, I said. Maybe. Or maybe it means we are really good at looking at problems from fresh angles. The class descended into argument. Krill insisted that following established protocols was the only way to ensure accuracy. Lorna argued that human mathematics was too primitive to challenge Federation standards. The Threndix collective debated among themselves so loudly that their translator started smoking. And Marcus just sat there, still balancing on 2 chair legs, looking amused. I called for order. Enough. Mr. Webb, I will review your calculations privately. For now, let us move on to today's planned lesson. Which is? Marcus asked. The practical applications of gravitational harmonics in faster-than-light travel. His hand shot up immediately. Oh, can I ask about the Alcubierre drive modifications? We will be covering the standard Vexian pulse drive, which is the Federation-approved method. Yeah, but the Alcubierre drive is way more fuel-efficient. Humans have been using it for decades. The Alcubierre drive, I said, my patience wearing thin, violates 3 Federation safety protocols. Does it though? Or does it just violate the mathematical models that assume uniform dimensional permeability? I closed my eyes. All 3 of them. Mr. Webb. Professor Thex. Please stop talking. Sure thing. He leaned back further in his chair. Just one more question though. What? If the Federation's math is so accurate, why did you need to classify the Kelverix incident instead of just explaining what happened? You know what the worst part was? He was smiling when he said it. Not a mocking smile, not a superior smile. Just a genuinely curious smile, like he honestly wanted to know the answer. I dismissed the class early. I needed time to think. More importantly, I needed time to check Marcus's calculations without an audience. 3 hours later, I was still checking them. And they were still correct. The human had found a fundamental flaw in Federation quantum mechanics. Not a small error, not a rounding problem. A genuine, significant mistake that had been replicated across every textbook, every research paper, every calculation for the past 1,000 cycles. And he had done it in one night, using notation he invented himself, while probably eating those horrible Earth snacks I had seen him carrying. I pulled up his admission file. Marcus Webb, age 22 in Earth years. Undergraduate degree in physics from some institution called State University. Test scores that were adequate but not exceptional by Federation standards. Psychological evaluation noting tendency toward unconventional problem solving, and difficulty following instructions. That last part should have been in larger font. There was a knock on my office door. "Come in." Marcus entered, still wearing that ridiculous hoodie. "Hey, Professor Thex. Got a minute? I suppose I owe you that much, considering you just overturned a millennium of accepted theory." He had the audacity to look embarrassed. "Yeah, sorry about that. I did not mean to cause a thing in class. I just figured if I saw the mistake, someone else probably did too, and maybe it was okay to talk about." "No one else saw the mistake, Mr. Webb. Because no one else was looking for it. We were all too busy following the rules." "Is that a bad thing?" I gestured for him to sit. "You tell me. You are the one who seems to think rules are optional." "Not optional," he corrected. "Just not sacred. Like, rules are tools, right? They help us work together and avoid chaos. But if a rule is not actually helping, if it is just in place because it has always been in place, then maybe it is worth questioning. And what if questioning the rules leads to disaster?" Marcus shrugged. "What if not questioning them does?" I did not have a good answer for that. "Look," he continued, "I am not trying to be difficult. I actually really want to learn from the Federation. You all have technology and knowledge that humans have not even dreamed of. But I also think maybe humans have something to offer too. We are really good at looking at systems and figuring out which parts are actually necessary and which parts are just there because nobody has bothered to remove them. That sounds like chaos. Or evolution." We sat in silence for a moment. Outside my office window, the twin suns of the Institute's home world were setting, casting long shadows across the academic complex. "Your corrections to the gravitational harmonics equations," I finally said. "They will need to be peer-reviewed. Obviously. It will take time. Perhaps several cycles. The Federation does not change its fundamental theories quickly." "Makes sense. And in the meantime, you will need to complete your coursework using the standard notation and methods, even if you believe them to be flawed." Marcus grimaced. "Do I have to?" "Yes. Even though they are wrong. Even though they are wrong." He sighed dramatically. "Fine. But I am going to keep my own notes in my notation. For when your equations get updated and everyone needs to learn the new system. The confidence of this human. If my equations get updated." "When," he repeated firmly. "Because they are right, and you know it." The next few weeks were, to put it in human terms, absolutely insane. Marcus did, technically, follow my instructions. He used standard notation in his assignments. He attended every lecture. He even stopped balancing on two chair legs after Krill filed a formal safety complaint. But following the letter of the law while completely ignoring its spirit seemed to be a particular human talent. For example, when I assigned a problem set on gravitational wave propagation, Marcus completed it using the standard formulas. Then he attached a second solution showing why the standard formulas produced results that were off by 0.3%, including experimental data from human deep space probes to prove his point. When we covered dimensional folding theory, he built a working model using what he called household items. I am still not entirely sure what a paperclip is, but apparently 17 of them plus some elastic string and a power cell can demonstrate complex spatial geometry better than our 100,000 credit holographic simulator. Krill hated him. Lorna found him fascinating in the way one might find a statistical anomaly fascinating. The Threndix collective was divided, which for a hive mind was apparently quite uncomfortable. And me? I was beginning to suspect that humans were going to be either the Federation's greatest asset or its biggest headache. Possibly both. The real trouble started in week 4. We were covering faster-than-light communication theory, specifically the quantum entanglement protocols that allowed instantaneous messaging across galactic distances. Standard stuff, been around for thousands of cycles, works perfectly fine. Marcus raised his hand. Of course he did. Yes, Mr. Webb. Why do the protocols require a 7-second initialization buffer? To ensure stable entanglement across the quantum field, I replied, pulling up the relevant equations. The buffer allows for field harmonization before data transmission begins. Right, but what if you skip that step? The entire class turned to stare at him. Even the Threndix collective, which did not have traditional eyes, somehow managed to convey a sense of horrified attention. You cannot skip the initialization buffer, Krill said, his color-coding stylus hovering frozen above his data pad. That would destabilize the entire quantum matrix. Would it though? Marcus pulled out his personal data pad. Because I was looking at the underlying mathematics, and it seems like the buffer is compensating for a rounding error in the original entanglement calculations. If you correct the error, you do not need the buffer. I felt my throat sacs inflating again. Mr. Webb, the quantum communication protocols are used by every species in the Federation. Billions of messages are transmitted every day. The system works. Sure, but it could work faster. 7 seconds is an acceptable delay. Is it though? What about emergency situations? Medical crises? Military applications? 7 seconds could mean the difference between life and death. Lorna's translator clicked rapidly. The protocols were designed with safety as the primary concern. Speed is secondary to reliability. But what if you could have both? Marcus was leaning forward now, his eyes bright with that particular human intensity that I had learned meant he was about to suggest something either brilliant or catastrophic. Look, I spent some time in the engineering labs last week. You did what? I had not authorized that. Yeah, talk to Professor Kelm. Nice lady, all 4 of her. Anyway, she let me run some simulations on the quantum relay systems. If you modify the entanglement field generators to account for the corrected mathematics, you can eliminate the buffer entirely. Instantaneous communication becomes actually instantaneous. The classroom erupted. Krill was insisting this violated fundamental safety protocols. Lorna was calculating probability matrices. The Threndix collective was arguing with itself so intensely that small sparks of bioelectricity were arcing between their bodies. I pulled up Marcus's simulation data. Because of course he had already run simulations. Of course he had convinced a senior professor to give him lab access. Of course the results showed exactly what he claimed they would show. This is insanely dangerous, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Is it? Or is it just different from what we are used to? Those are not the same thing, Mr. Webb. Aren't they kind of the same thing though? Before I could respond, the classroom door opened. Professor Kelm entered, along with 2 individuals wearing the dark uniforms of the Federation Science Council. My secondary heart sank. Professor Thex, Professor Kelm said, her 4 voices harmonizing in a way that suggested serious business. We need to speak with you and Mr. Webb. Immediately. We were escorted to a conference room deep in the administrative section of the institute. The kind of room with shielding that prevented any electronic monitoring. The kind of room where careers went to die. The lead council member, a Vexian named Court, sat across from us. His expression was unreadable, which for a species that communicated partially through color changes was genuinely impressive. Mr. Webb, Court began, we have been monitoring your academic progress with great interest. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Marcus asked. That depends entirely on your next answers. Your corrections to the gravitational harmonics equations have been reviewed by our top scientists. They are, unfortunately, correct. Why unfortunately? I asked. Court's skin flickered through several colors I could not quite interpret. Because it means that every faster-than-light capable ship in the Federation has been operating on flawed mathematics for the past 1,000 cycles. We have been lucky. Extraordinarily lucky. But luck runs out. The room went very quiet. How bad is it? Professor Kelm asked softly. Bad enough that we have already issued a confidential engineering bulletin to all shipyards and fleet commands. The drives are being recalibrated as we speak. Court turned back to Marcus. Your quantum communication proposal, however, presents a different problem. Let me guess, Marcus said. It works too well. It works perfectly. We tested it this morning. Instantaneous communication with zero latency across a distance of 40 light-years. Court leaned forward. Do you understand what that means? Better communications? It means the balance of power in the galaxy just shifted. Whoever controls this technology controls information itself. Response times in warfare drop to nothing. Economic trading happens in real time across sectors. Espionage becomes exponentially more effective. Court's colors shifted to something that looked like concern mixed with anger. It means you just invented something that could start a war. Marcus blinked. Oh. Oh, Court repeated. Yes. Oh. I cleared my throat. Surely the Council can regulate this technology. Ensure it is used responsibly. Can we? How do we regulate something that every species will want, that provides such an overwhelming advantage that refusing to adopt it becomes its own form of suicide? Court stood up, pacing the length of the room. This is the problem with human thinking. You see a problem, you solve it, you never stop to ask whether the solution creates bigger problems. That is not fair, I found myself saying. Marcus was trying to help. Was he? Or was he trying to prove he was smarter than everyone else? Marcus's expression hardened. You know what? Yeah, maybe part of it was ego. I am 22 years old, I am at the most prestigious school in the galaxy, and I want to prove I belong here. But mostly I was just trying to fix things that were broken. Is that really so terrible? It is when fixing them breaks everything else, Court replied. Then maybe everything else deserves to be broken. The room went silent. You could have heard a quark decay. Explain, Court said quietly. Marcus stood up, and I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. You all act like the Federation is this perfect system that just needs minor adjustments. But it is not. It is a system built on rules that nobody questions because questioning them is uncomfortable. Your gravitational math was wrong for 1,000 cycles, and nobody noticed because everyone was too busy following protocols to check if the protocols made sense. Your communication systems are deliberately slowed down because someone decided safety was more important than speed, and nobody asked if we could have both. Tradition exists for a reason, Court said. So does progress, Marcus shot back. And sometimes progress means admitting that the old ways are not the best ways. Yeah, my communication system could be used for war. But it could also save millions of lives. Medical data transmitted instantly. Disaster warnings with no delay. Scientific discoveries shared in real time across the entire galaxy. You are so worried about what could go wrong that you are ignoring everything that could go right. Professor Kelm's 4 voices hummed in thoughtful harmony. He makes a valid point, Court. He makes a dangerous point. Are those not sometimes the same thing? Court sat back down heavily. What do you suggest we do, Mr. Webb? Release this technology to the entire Federation and hope that everyone uses it responsibly? No, Marcus said. I suggest you stop thinking of it as my technology and start thinking of it as our technology. Human, Vexian, Quellan, Threndix, everyone. Make it open source. Let every species contribute to developing the safety protocols. Yeah, it will be messy. Yeah, there will be arguments and disagreements and probably some spectacular failures. But at least we will all be working together instead of having some council somewhere deciding what everyone else gets to know. That is chaos. That is democracy. Court and Marcus stared at each other across the conference table. I found myself holding my breath, which was difficult with my respiratory system. Finally, Court's colors shifted to something I recognized as grudging respect. You humans are going to be such a problem. Probably, Marcus agreed. But we will be your problem. And maybe that is not such a bad thing. The meeting ended without any clear resolution, which I suppose was resolution enough. The Science Council took Marcus's research, promised to form a committee, and suggested strongly that he focus on his regular coursework for a while. Marcus lasted exactly 3 days before he started questioning the fundamental assumptions underlying warp field theory. As we walked back across campus, the twin suns casting their light through the environmental shields, I found myself wondering what the Federation was going to look like in 50 cycles. 100 cycles. Humans had only been members for a short time, and already they were poking holes in everything we thought we knew. Hey, Professor Thex, Marcus said, interrupting my thoughts. Yes. Thanks for having my back in there. I am not sure I did. I am not even sure you were right. Yeah, but you defended me anyway. That means something. We walked in silence for a moment. Mr. Webb, can I ask you something? Sure. Do humans ever worry that you are changing things too fast? That maybe some traditions exist because they actually work. Marcus considered this. All the time. But we also worry about the opposite. About getting so comfortable with how things are that we stop trying to make them better. I guess we figure it is better to risk breaking things while trying to improve them than to let them stay broken because we are afraid of change. That is a very human perspective. Is that a compliment or an insult? I thought about my textbook, soon to be rewritten. About quantum communication protocols that would revolutionize the galaxy. About a classroom full of students who were learning that sometimes the right answer was not in the manual. Yes, I said finally. Marcus laughed, that peculiar human sound that always seemed too loud for the situation. Fair enough. As we reached the central plaza, I noticed other students gathering, data pads out, discussing something with unusual intensity. A group of Vexians arguing with some Quellans. Threndix collectives humming in agitated patterns. What is going on? I asked a passing student. Have you not heard, Professor? Someone leaked the corrected gravitational equations on the student network. Everyone is checking their calculations. Half the physics department is having existential crises. I turned slowly to look at Marcus. You did not. He had the decency to look slightly ashamed. I mean, the Science Council said to focus on my coursework. They did not say anything about my independent research. Mr. Webb. Professor Thex. You are going to change everything, are you not? He grinned, that same confident grin from the first day of class. I am certainly going to try. And looking at him, at this impossible human who could not follow a rule without questioning it, who saw problems everywhere others saw normalcy, who had somehow convinced me that maybe, just maybe, the Federation needed someone willing to break things to make them better, I realized something terrifying. I believed him. The alien classroom had followed the rules for thousands of cycles. The human followed logic for 22 years. I was beginning to suspect that logic was going to win. And honestly, I was okay with that.